Hello, everybody. If it's Wednesday, it's Warhammer, and that must mean it's time for another episode of Warhammer Weekly. Joining me, as always, is my co-host Tom. What's up, Tom? How you doing?
Hello, friends. How are you?
You were very delayed
It's
there.
a beautiful day in that neighborhood. Well, no, you're delayed, my friend. Whether you realize it or not, like you went to to present and you were like all choppy.
Hmm. That's entirely possible. This is a hotel show, so we're dealing with
Mm.
hotel internet. So, sorry in advance, but this is what it is. All right. Well, why don't we get started here, and let's get amongst it. I'm still waiting for it to actually start. There we go. Okay, we're finally starting over on my phone, just making sure it's working. We're gonna talk about the future, as you said, of Flesh Eater Courts tonight. That's going to be a discussion. What's coming? I think there's a lot in store for this army. My opinions on what is happening with this army have changed a lot recently because of things I have read in
Mm.
books, and we'll talk about that, Tom. We'll talk about exactly what's going down over in FEC land. But first, of course, let's do some news.
News. Right. Sorry, I'm truly taken by the state of the stream. I don't know if you see this or not, but on my screen at least, it looks like you live in Pixel Universe.
It does look like I live in Pixel
Maybe that's
Universe.
just my. It's delightful, just
Mm-hmm.
utterly delightful. Okay. Anyways, well, we're gonna push on through. Okay, let's talk about the rumor engine. Let's start there. That's always a safe spot to start.
That sounds good. It's a complete 40K thing. It's a literal gun.
Who likes a? It's a gun barrel.
Mm-hmm.
And KO don't have gun barrels like that. It's 40K. We're moving on.
Correct.
Done. Um, so how about that Warcry terrain set? Let's talk about that.
Yes, indeed. All right.
Uh,
I've got it up on
I
screen.
love me. Um, I I don't know. I'm just a huge sucker for the Warcry terrain sets.
Okay.
Like normal terrain sets are fine, but I don't know. Um, yeah, I love them. I love it so much. I mean, yes, it's all weird. Like it we're getting some of the um I guess that's Fire Slayer. I mean, that's how they're trying to frame it, as like some of the Fire Slayer ruins. Um but I don't know. I love the bamboo weird like wood stuff that they've been going on, like the gnarl wood stuff. That's me.
Yeah, it's fine. It's like it's a completely dedicated Warcry terrain set. We talked a long time ago, Tom, about how we thought it would be a good idea to make realm-based terrain sets. Like we really missed a trick and they
Yeah.
left money on the table. And it's funny because that's sort of come about through Warcry, right? Like because Warcry spends a
Yep.
bunch of time.
Whatever
Yeah.
Yep.
And so now, this is more of that. But I have to say, I'm not sure this is like enough of this thing. It's okay. I like the rocks. I like the bamboo thing, but I'm like, how much is this box? Because this is not a lot of terrain. It's cute.
I mean, it's a bunch of scattered terrain, which is what it looks like, and like it's three real pieces, a bunch of scatter, and two warbands, and they're probably going to charge us $220.
I mean, I hope not. I hope you're
Like,
not right about that. This is like a $60, $70 box of terrain in my estimation at best. At best, and I'm being generous.
sure. Like I'm assuming that it's going to come with the warbands, right?
I think no, this is just the terrain box according to the article. Like just the terrain.
Is it really?
Yep.
Okay. Well, I don't think they'll charge us 220 for just the terrain. I was casting that with an eye towards both warbands in there as well.
Nope. According to the article, this is like a standalone terrain box.
Okay. I hope it's not more than like 70 or 80. It'll probably be either 80 or 110. I'm hoping it's only 80,
Yeah.
but we shall see. Regardless, in general I like it. I like again, but I've liked the gnarlwood kind of gur stuff.
Sure.
I'm not a real big fan of the Fire Slayer stuff here. Like, it doesn't strike me as interesting at all. But I do like the bamboo, like treehouse stuff.
Okay.
So
Yeah, I
for
mean,
whatever that's worth.
this whole season has honestly been kind of a snooze for me. I'll be honest. I just haven't liked much of it. I can't wait till we get to another realm. I want to see what else is out there. I think there's, like what does the terrain of Ulgu or Haish or, honestly, like I think we could go back and look at some really amazing Gairan terrain, like the life realm, right? Like I think
Sure.
about what that could be. There's so many amazing places that the more realms we could construct in these terrain kits, and I just feel like I I like that we sort of we got our wish, but the monkey's paw curled because we were like we want terrain for each realm, right? And what we ended
Yep.
up getting was like a long time of that terrain, right? Like so much. Like, oh, you want this terrain for a realm? Have so much of it. And it's like, oh boy, that feels like too much. Like, how many more meat tree boxes do I need? How many more of these kinds of like twisted trees and, the connective little bamboo walkways and everything? Like, geez, there comes a point, and I think I'm pretty much there
Yeah.
with this one. Like this season, I'm done with it. Let's see something new. Can we be in any new realm, please? At this point, that's my answer.
Yeah. Gur's like I'm ready for us to move on from Gur. Like 1 year in a realm would be nice. 3 years is maybe pushing it a little bit.
Yeah. Yep. So, is what it is. Um. Okay. Cool. What's next?
Yeah. Yeah. And then we also have some Golden Demon category changes for our painters out there.
Yes. Yes. Let's talk about that. And don't worry, I apologize if anything's a little fuzzy for everybody. Like I said, hello everyone. We are on hotel internet here, so I'm at the mercy of this. This will be a relatively more discussion-focused show. So sorry everybody, but that's okay. Hopefully you can still hear us all right. I know it gets all real bad and wonky sometimes. I promise it'll catch up at some point.
Hades said Ulgu will be next, so prepare for 3 years of shadows. Not only shadows, it'll be shadows that we have to paint. You know how there's like clouds, like how we end up getting stuck painting clouds all the time. So we're gonna get stuck painting pixels. It's gonna be the worst.
Yeah.
Or not pixels. We're gonna be stuck painting shadows.
Yep. So, but anyways, to the category list change for Golden Demon. Okay, what's relevant here? In 40K, vehicle and large collapse together, which I'm like not the biggest fan of, only because vehicles are almost always traditionally judged separate in most miniature painting contests because they are more of a scale model type of challenge than they are a traditional
It's a
modeling
different
challenge.
skill set as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Things like the Horus Heresy is going to be weird because I assume that's everything from like a Horus Heresy tank and vehicle to a Horus Heresy unit to a Primarch to whatever, right? It'll all be in there. Same thing with like Necromunda. That'll be strange how much it pulls into those categories. They'll be so big in that they'll be like dioramas competing with single figures, competing with units, right? Which means that like if you enter a unit, you lose, basically, because there's no way you're going to do the unit to the same level as the individual model. And then Warhammer Underworlds with its own category is fascinating to me. Like Blood Bowl, I don't mind. Blood Bowl is such a constrained, simplified thing. That is, it's all the football teams, right? So that actually makes a lot of sense to me as its own category. Underworld's same way. Like that's a very constrained category. But it's just funny because now what are people going to put in Age of Sigmar unit? Because, Age of Sigmar units were just dominated by Warhammer Underworld's submissions. So that's very interesting. But yeah, I mean, in the end, I'm like, okay, it's fine. More categories is good. More chances for people to pick up demons. It's great. More chances for people to paint what they love. That's great. It's not a thing that I care about for next year, so no skin off my nose. It sounds good to me. I'm fine with it. Okay, cool.
Yeah. I don't know that I'll ever compete, so that's fine.
Yeah, exactly. But interesting enough. All right, cool. Let's move on, Tom. Let's do a little pick of the week. Uh, what do we got? What do we got for some pick of the week here, buddy?
Yeah, I'm gonna. Man, I have really been taken by Trug's Trogherd,
Mm-hmm.
the new gets all trolls stuff, and AOS Coach did a recent show with Dom Trogherd Hammer on Twitter, and I it's a great show. I want to for anybody that is jonesing on those trolls. It's just a great like 2 hour deep dive into trolls. It's fantastic, and just everything that's going on in that book. So big fan. I know it got me stoked for it. I may be maybe picking up trolls for my next army that I'm working on after my current one.
Nice, nice, very good. For myself, I am going to recommend the continued series. I talked about this last week, but the videos have continued, and so it's worth mentioning it again because there is a many-part series. Since we're going to be building on a little bit of Dawnbringer's Part 2 lore, here tonight, I'm going to shout out 2 Plus Tough Doug, one of the nicest men in Warhammer Age of Sigmar, again, because his ongoing series reviewing the Dawnbringer lore continues. And what we're going to talk about tonight when we talk about the future of Flesh Eater Courts will actually build on some of the things in that Dawnbringer's Part 2 book. So go check out that lore series, and I think it's up to like Part 7 or 8 now. It's so far along, I don't remember. But go check that out. I'll link it down in the description. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Very good. All right. Let's talk hobby time because, Tom, I think you actually did a little bit of hobby over this weekend. Like, at least something was assembled.
I mean, define a little bit. So here's what I'll say.
Hit me.
I put 22 models together.
That's good.
That definitely happened,
Mm-hmm.
based in everything. And I began building a board. So a bunch of stuff is all like viced together and being glued. So work is happening in this house. That's true, boys.
Look, man, that's hobby. That counts. That kind of assembly and all that, that's real, especially building a display board. Yeah. So you're back on the train, baby. Way to go.
I'm back in. Absolutely. My hope is before I go leave the country on Saturday to get a bunch of the stuff like the paste and all that, the texturing done, at least the initial round of it, so it can dry over the week. So we'll see though.
Very nice. For myself, I finished up. I don't have anything with me, obviously, because I'm in a hotel. But I finished up. What's his name? Zograk, the orc, the new orc special character for Ironjaws. Finished that guy up. He was a lot of fun to paint. I actually converted mine some because I didn't like his normal. Did you notice, Tom, that he's just like not really armored? He's like wearing a weird apron and stuff. I don't know if you noticed that in the actual.
Yeah,
But I didn't like that, so I gave him like full brute armor. Like I switched around his armor. He's fully armored. I gave him his little tongs, so he's still easily recognizable. I used his face and stuff. Very cool model. So finished that dude, and now I am working on a bust for the Shinobi from Journeyman Miniatures. A bust I've wanted to paint for a long time. It's been giving me all sorts of fits and starts and troubles because I'm trying a very unusual lighting scheme and I'm fighting my way through it. And there's been multiple times where I thought about just saying never mind and going back and doing it in a way I'm much more comfortable with. But what do we do then if we don't push ourselves and fail? Then we don't learn. So I'm pushing through the failure. But it's fun to try a really really unusual sort of lighting scheme and see what I can do. So there you go. So let's go ahead and jump into this. Let's take a little overview. Let's start there. Flesh Eater Quartz. Let me see what you think of my overview here, Tom. This has always been a very limited force. Okay? Like, let's be honest.
Yep.
This was a sort of this was one of the splinter factions from original AOS that they just decided to make into its own army, right? A lot of this was drawn
Yep.
from the larger sort of quote unquote, I don't mean this in the proper term, but the sort of legions of Nagash, as it were, right? But they
Yep.
they
Yep.
took all the ghoulish things out. It's gotten a couple new kits since launch, but really for the most part, this is one start collecting box gives you your whole army. The heroes are made out of the units itself, annoyingly in most cases, not all heroes, but most of them, most of the courtiers. The Vargulf is like incredibly old, fine cast nonsense. You have like the Aberrant Ghoul King and the guy on the chair, and those are basically your new sort of sculpts that you've got. Everything else is like the ancient ghouls, the showing its age, Ghoul King on Terrorgeist and so forth, right? And these kinds of models. And it's basically like 7 kits. It's the same sort of thing again, where it's like, okay, your melee troops, your troops, non-hero stuff, right? Is like ghouls, crypt horrors, crypt flayers, right? Which was just itself an invention, just like an invention of a new kit out of the 2 builds of the old kit, right?
Yep. Yep.
And then recently, obviously, it got one really new non-hero kit in the Warcry Warband, right? So this has always been a really like melee focused swarm army, like lots of low quality regenerative units and the Ghoul King as a hammer. And the heyday of this army was back in 2019 during the duel, the 2 terrors, as it were, of Slaanesh and FEC. Yep. FEC still on that same book, by the way, that it had then. I realized that, like, it's the same book.
Yeah. So the reality is this is truly Bretonnia.
Yeah. Yep, I think that's right.
I mean, not only are they the remnant, right, that survived in the midst, but they carry on the traditions of the ancient Bretonnians with not getting updated books ever.
Yep. Yep. And the the reality of this thing is it's always had sort of this singular game plan. And like if that game plan actually worked in the meta, then the army was good. In fact, it could be dominant, right? If the game plan wasn't, then the force didn't adjust and it was like bad. This is an army that's like swung all over the place, like been down in the low 40s, up in the high 50s, even touching some of the 60s, like at various points in time. It is wild how much this army has gone all over the place in sort of win rate and quality and force in the meta.
To be clear, to be fair, like some of the rules have been changed to like the ASF and stuff like that have changed how it functions, right? Like from when it was truly a monster and where it's at now.
Sure.
But yeah, it's something, that's for sure.
Tom, I want you to regale everybody for a moment. Take back to the summer of 2019. How much did you play summer and fall 2019, right? Before the big nerf hammers came down.
It wasn't. I mean, it launched in February.
Yep.
So if you'll remember, this came and it stormed Adepticon, right? Like it just, like it was the dominant kind of like whirlwind that was ripping through Adepticon. That
right, like the Ghoul King on Terrorgeist was this amazing hammer, and because it could do like 12 to 24 mortal wounds pretty reliably and always fight first, it would just kill the entire enemy army. Like that was it. Armies, just the wounds that they had, the mortal wound resilience that they had, the damage, it was just like the biggest hammer. And there was like no shooting in the meta, nobody who had high mortal wound resistance, right? So this thing just tore everything up. It was just like this Gristlegore terror, right?
Yeah.
And the only other army that was in competition at that time was Slaanesh, because they had Always Strikes Last and would blah 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 and all this kind of stuff, right? And I just think it's it's wild to me because you could basically, if that army worked, obviously, as you said, a lot of the ground, the foundation underneath the army has shifted, right, in what's going on. But if you took that original army
Yeah.
exactly as it was then and put it into the current meta, it would just get slaughtered. It would just die. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. It's true.
Um,
Sorry, I'm watching the stream and it's so bad.
I know
It's
the
so
picture keeps
bad.
bouncing in and out. I understand. I apologize, everyone. This is what it is. We're here. It's cool. Enjoy the dulcet tones of our audio, right? Like it's the audio should be crisp
Yep.
and stuff like that. So that's what matters. The picture's not going to be great this
Yeah.
week, folks.
Just
I
turn. Hey,
apologize.
folks, just turn your monitor off. Just turn your monitor off and listen. Listen to our smooth, sultry voices
Yeah, this
as
is a
we talk
podcast this
about
week, basically. So
the
it's fine. I apologize.
the Undead Kings.
Yeah, like this is the
Indeed.
best Wi-Fi that they could give me, and here we are. So I don't know what to tell you. Um,
Yeah.
this is what we have. I'm on the road. We can either do the show like this, or we can not do the show. Those are the choices, folks. So there it is. Okay, but I'm glad the audio is coming through. Okay, so that's all that really matters in the end, hopefully. All right. Okay. All right. So I thought one of the things I made a little slide here, Tom, that's just all of the current offerings. Like literally, this is everything on the GW
Sure.
website right now for FEC. Okay. And it's hilarious to me
Okay.
how few kits it is, right? First of all, it really is just like buy the Start Collecting, get the army, basically. Obviously, you're missing the Warcry Warband and the Charnel Throne,
Yep.
right? But
Which let me just say that that Start Collecting, I am still a long time fan of the Start Collecting box for FEC. Like if you want to start an army, pick up that old Start Collecting box if you can find it.
yeah, it's still there. It's still available on the website right now. So it's the top result. So yeah, you can grab it. There's a couple of those still available. That those different kinds of like get everything in the army kits. But this thing has nothing because even multiples of these kits that it shows as separate entries are obviously the same kit, right? Like Cryptors and Crypt Flayers. That's the same box, right? Zombie Dragon and Terrorgeist and Ghoul King
Yep.
on Zombie
Yep.
Dragon. These are all the same thing. It's like 4 of these units are the same box, right? It's
Yeah.
funny to me
I
because
mean, realistically, there are three boxes.
yeah, I mean,
That's it.
well,
That is
5.
the army.
Yeah,
There
I
are
mean, like
three
depends if you count the
boxes.
terrain piece, the Vargolf, and the new Warcry
I
thing.
don't
But
count
yes,
no, I don't count. Nope, nope, because you won't find those on a shelf anywhere. You will only find 3 boxes
mm-hmm.
plus the Start Collecting and then the Dawnbringers delegation.
Yep.
That's it. Like
Yep.
yes, Flesh Eater, yes, endless spells, yes, terrain. Hypothetically, there is the Vargolf, but he's fine cast, so you have to like order him, or metal, right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, there's basically nothing else.
It's pretty wild. And so like this is just an army with not much in it, right? So
How is it? Let me just ask this: how has it survived this long?
I think for the same reason Ironjawz did. I mean, what do you think? Give me your guess. Why has this endured? Why is this still around? Being as small as it is. It's an appendix faction that got its own book and just stuck around. Why?
Right. I think that it's probably because it offers something unique within Death as a Grand Alliance, and it's self-contained largely, and so and the zombie dragon and all that has a permanent home in, well, technically even the flayers in that sense. All of that has a permanent home in Soulblight. And so you add one more box and you get an entire subfaction that doesn't need really any additional support.
I think this endured because it's a very simple faction. to both collect and play and paint. So I think that matters. Okay. Like how easily someone can get into something. Like FEC is pretty easy to get into. You can speed paint this army in a weekend and have it look pretty decent. Right?
Yep.
It's easy to collect for all the reasons we mentioned.
I functionally did that. Yes.
Right. Economically, it's easy to collect. Like it's not an expensive army as things go. And lore-wise, it's got to be one of the biggest home runs in all of Age of Sigmar, right? Because like the delusion and everything like that is just really compelling as a story. I mean, I think that's. I think you put those three things together, you get an army that, despite the fact it's got a handful of units and even less kits, and you get something that sticks around. That's really what it comes down to, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what made me change my mind about this, Tom, and we'll talk about it in a minute, was the recent Iron Jaws release. Like if I would have loaded up the Iron Jaws page, okay, 2 months ago or whatever, it would have looked pretty similar to this.
It would have looked similar.
Yeah. Now, there was a couple more Underworlds warbands, right, or whatever, here or there, but it would have mostly been the same story. It doesn't have the whole, like, you have to make the heroes from the actual units and stuff like that. Like, it was designed as its own range, as opposed to, like, cobbled together out of the leftover bits that were on the floor, which is what FEC really was originally, right?
Yep.
But then they took that Iron Jaws range and they expanded it in some really interesting ways, right? Adding, 2 new heroes, basically 3 new kits, 1 reimagined existing kit, right? And we got a nice expansion to the range, right? Big Pig, 3 variants, new Ardboys, new Ardboy leader, Zograk, great stuff, right? So it occurred to me that FEC is in like really prime position for that same thing to happen. Okay. Now that alone didn't make me want to do this show or make me think that the status quo was going to change. But then something else occurred, which we'll talk about in a minute. But my point is, positionally, this army is very much in the same place Iron Jaws was, and so is ripe for the same thing, where you can introduce 2, 3, 4 boxes, have that build 5, 6 kits, or 5, 6 units, sorry, right? So 3, 4 kits, 5, 6 units, and radically transform the entire line, right? And the experience of playing this army. Especially if you're going to end up putting out a new book at the same time, which, this is the last book to be released, right? We all know it. Like, this is our eventual winter, end of year, beginning of next year.
Like, it's yes, it's dropping. Yeah.
Right. So, to me, the part of this that's always let me down the most is the story is so cool and it's actually kind of hard. Like, a bunch of people want to do Bretonnian conversions, but it's actually pretty hard to do that with these models because, like, the knights aren't actually 2 separate guys. They're just one big dude. The little dudes turn into peasants easily enough. Like, the ghouls becoming peasants is very straightforward.
Yeah.
And, Jarian was an absolute win. The new Harbinger dude out of Dawnbringers Part 1, I think that dude is really, really great. I mean, he was probably the second best Harbinger model in the release, and the only reason he doesn't get first, like, I like him more, but I have to objectively judge that Nurgle guy better. I mean, the Nurgle dude, based on the classic piece of art, based on Deathbringer or whatever, is just like, an amazing model. But still, the fact that you're in the same conversation with that guy says everything, right? So
it does.
So, okay, but first I want to cover some more recent changes. Let's talk about what's happened with this army recently. So I've got here some of the more relevant recent FAQs. The most recent 2 in magenta are from the 9.14 update, so this month. That was just 2 like true clarifications on like the crypt flares and what they can do with their movement ability. And then, of course, the Morgaunt Grand Court before the previous FAQ to this one, right, was in a rough spot. I don't know if you remember this, Tom, But FEC had like screamed quite literally up the charts to the most out of balance armies in AOS. And it had done so on the back of that new Warcry faction, right? Where, people were basically, those things were being regenerated, not really infinitely, but you get it. They were coming back at and being summoned and yada yada yada, like way more than they should, because they were serfs, right?
Yeah.
And so when put in Morgaunt, there was just like a lot of bad interactions, because this book is still running on like mid early AOS
Reroll
2.0 technology,
Yeah.
right? So it's just crazy. And so, like it shot way up because of basically some bent rules. There's a couple other interactions I won't go into because they're not relevant anymore. They've all been corrected, right? But there was a couple other bad interactions. But this is a book, Tom. Do you remember how sub-factions even used to be? This is how it still is, right? That has those heavy sub-factions with like tons of rules that decide your command trait.
Super heavy sub-factions.
Yeah. Right? And this is still their book. As I mentioned, you were exactly right. Like, this came out in
generally for...
Yeah, good.
Yeah, I was just saying, generally there was like 4 abilities, including an item, sometimes a command ability. Like, it was just so heavy.
Yeah. And so, it was like suddenly be highly abusable because of like one new unit and its interactions with some of the old rules, right? And it's funny because in a lot of this army's history as a sort of terror on the tables, it had done so through the power of like its few hammers, right? Where like its true hammers, like that is to say, either there's a point or two in history where it did so through like
everything was a hammer generally in this.
Sure.
Yep.
Everything's a nail to a hammer, yes. And like, the kumquat, as we affectionately call him, the Ghoul King on Terrorgeist, right? Or just like giant piles of ghouls all making like, infinite attacks basically, right? Were sort of the two ways that this army ever actually accomplished anything. Crypt Horrors and Crypt Flayers were always like cute but around, but generally not a path to victory. It was basically like those two things. And then a Vargulf that would summon or whatever. You had Smash Bat for a little while. I mean, Smash Bat's what inspired me to speed paint an FEC army over a weekend, because I loved me some Smash Bat. That was great times. Bring back Smash Bat, you cowards. So like you had a decent amount of summoning, right, to like hold positions and play the board control game, while at the same time you had, for a while, like there was a period where this was one of the scariest, hammers in the game, right? That's reality. And where this thing would just like lift your unit and then lift the next unit and then lift the next unit, right?
And you would charge into it and it would lift the thing that charged into it.
Right. Right. Exactly. It's like if you couldn't triple charge it, you couldn't kill it. Right? I mean, you remember that discussion, right? It was like people would be like, "Oh, it's easy to kill a Ghoul King on Terrorgeist. You just have to triple charge it." Okay.
Yes, that was a conversation. It was.
I love people's answers to broken stuff. It's really fun. I mean, no, obviously the answer is we should have had some shooting that was worth a darn, which we didn't at the time, right?
Right. That didn't exist at the time. Yeah.
Right. And so that was the issue. But the other thing that changed recently is we got the new scrolls, right? So with Dawnbringers, we got new scrolls for basically the troops. And Tom, I gotta say, you know what this made me think about? Why doesn't this happen more? Why?
Why don't they just update scrolls? Yeah.
Like, I know this is a really old book, and I'm not saying you just do it on a whim, like put it out as a PDF. But if you're going to put out Dawnbringers or something like that, some book, it had Jarian in it. He was the new model. None of these other guys had new models.
Book, yeah.
Yeah. Right? They just got new scrolls because they got what eventually will be their FEC scrolls, I'm guessing, like the new book scrolls. Right? And
I mean, it makes sense. Like you may run into some overlap. Like that may
sure.
be a problem, right? Where you get like new scrolls utilizing old rules and stuff like that. But in general, like if with a little bit of testing, it should not be the end of the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And it makes me just wonder, like, boy, when we've got this opportunity where we know there's some scrolls that are like just bad. How many scrolls do we? I'm not saying all these FEC scrolls were just bad, but they clearly wanted to update them. But like, how many scrolls in the game right now, Tom? Can you look at and just go, well, that's trash. It's complete trash, right? But the good number of
I
them.
mean, more than I want to admit.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot. Yeah.
So if you're going to touch that army at all in Dawnbringers, why not just throw a new scroll in there for other units in the army that are bad? Like, how hard is that? Crypt horrors, crypt ghouls, and crypt flayers did not figure in any like super meaningful way to Dawnbringers Part One to the story. Okay, I mean they were mentioned, they existed. You know, I mean Jarian was really and him as a harbinger was really the main thing. That was what the story focused around. The flayers and horrors and stuff were all just like there, being under their delusion, fighting like they always do.
Mm.
Nothing about that story or anything in it necessitated a new scroll. They just did it, right? Because it was a nice time to put out these new scrolls that are going to be in advance of the book. And my immediate thought was, more of that, please, right? Like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah.
why
Yeah.
would we not just do that all the time? You know, if you're going to mention like Skaven, put out a new Bell scroll since the existing Bell is crap, right? Or whatever, like Stormcast. You're going to touch on Stormcast at some point in Harbingers, I'm sure. Maybe. Okay, well, like the Night Relic Door or um, the Lord Veritant or whatever. I don't know, like really bad
Sure.
scrolls.
Sure. Yeah.
Just give those guys some new scrolls with the benefit of hindsight, and then just drop them into the app, and you're good to go, right?
Yeah.
So, it just feels like a real missed opportunity. But anyways, we got the new crypt horrors. We covered these in a previous show, but I just wanted to include them in here just as reference. We got the new crypt horrors, we got the new crypt ghouls, we got the new crypt flayers. And what's interesting about them is all of them are actually pretty interesting. The ghouls becoming quite a terror, having some pretty good abilities here with Rend. The flayers having that really interesting movement ability with the escort courtier, escort courtier, or however you
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, this is why I would take Unit A over Unit B over Unit C, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I could go with a longer death scream on the flares for them to actually have kind of like a ranged threat roll, but sure.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. But at the same time, I like that it's Ren 2, so that's cool. That's good. A plus on that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's just interesting overall, the nature of like these updated scrolls and what they meant. And it's also funny that these scrolls, and even though they're like really good and new and pretty decent, I think, and competitive in my mind, um, aren't actually the thing that had anything to do with this book suddenly shooting up in overall quality out of the stratosphere. It was a sort of bent functionality. Although I'm sure they helped some. They were contributory to it, to be fair. Okay. So anything else you want to say on, sort of recent changes, the current positions guide? Anything else strike your fancy or anything else like that?
Yes, but not from a rule standpoint. Actually, from a design standpoint.
Okay.
I love the Warcry Force.
Yep.
They look amazing. Like the leader wearing bone armor in such a way that like he feels knight-ish, right? The other design choice that they made in here that we started to see, but we started to see kind of like in mass with the beast flayers was the addition of weapons. like many of them carrying broken weapons. I've
Yep.
long been a proponent, the last probably like 4 to 5 months,
Yes.
of suggesting that when we get Flesh Eater Courts, we'll get an armed, like when they redo rules, we'll get something that leans more into that infantry.
Yep.
With like old, broken, rusted weapons and the like. And while we won't show it on the show, not that we really could right now.
Hey, it's been a little more stable for a little while. It looks okay.
Sure. There was a sprue that leaked on Reddit, and I didn't even know about it before this show, ironically. I went and somebody mentioned it in the chat, and I just Googled it. And as we started the show, I was like looking at the images. And let me tell you, we're getting new ghouls.
Yeah.
And they're armed with weapons.
Yeah. Yep.
And so that's happening.
Yeah, we're going to talk about new models. Absolutely. Like, but both, I was going to mention that offhand, but then also talk about what else we think we're seeing.
Yeah.
One of the advantages, as I said, this was such an appendix line that was just like, oh, we've kind of got these figs. They kind of don't fit in the regular army. We'll just make a whole army out of them. There, but for the grace of God, go this. What were they called, Tom? What were your mailmen called? The Swift Talk?
Swift Talk agents. Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, Swift Talk agents had more units. It had more units.
Yeah.
Than FEC.
Right. But it turns out being the mailmen isn't as compelling of a story.
Hey, I think it is, and I miss my Swift Talk agents, my Reavers, and my Skycutter chariots. Oh, and the Sea Guard. Beautiful.
Yeah, but that's just it. Like, that's why I'm saying there, but for the grace of God go I, right? Because it could have been, they just picked this one, AOS, the story of pre-AOS 1 and AOS 1 was these, like, them splitting everything up, what we frequently call ghettoization, right? Them splitting it up into all these little tiny sub-factions and making all these different names. And then, over the course of AOS 1, we slowly started grouping some things back together. But then we were just like this was one of the earliest things they put out as like a conceptual book, right? It was just like, oh no, this little sub-faction, this little thing, like they had this cool story idea of the grand illusion, right? And I really think that's what it was. I really think internally this story just designed most of the range without too much effort, right? In addition to adding kits.
It's true. I don't know that we're gonna, like, to be honest though, if we're talking about the future, I don't know that we're gonna lose crypto.
All right, I'm back with you. Okay. Hey, there we go. We're back. Okay, it worked. Cool. Okay, I can see it actually happening now. There we go.
Hey, folks.
I got it restarted. How about that? I didn't have to, like, I wasn't sure that was actually going to work, but it did. Yay. All right, can you still hear me okay, Tom?
I can.
All right, good.
I can.
It lives. We're back, baby. We're back, baby. Okay, cool. Sorry about that, everyone. Again, hotel internet. This is the world we live in. I don't know what to tell you. All right, so I want to talk about the future. Let's pivot here, Tom. This is going to be a short. The Summer King, the Blood Rose Prince. He is known by many names, okay? In the Age of Myth, this guy rose up against Nagash and Shroudcast or something like that. I remember, something like that. And he's in there for a long time. He was supposed to be this, like, really sort of noble leader in the Realm of the Dead in Shaiish, but he was, like, prone to fits of extreme rage. And he had gained extreme control over his own bloodlust. And he ends up in this prison for, like, a long time. And then Sigmar gets in a fight with Nagash, right? So the Age of Chaos, where Sigmar and Nagash have this breaking. Yeah?
Yep.
And as Sigmar is, like, going ham through Nagash's realm, one of the things that he destroys is this guy's prison. And so Usharan gets out gets on the lam. He's fleeing. Nobody knows where he is, and that's basically where he's remained to this day. And for a couple of for a little while now, as we've been talking about kind of Harbinger stuff and some future prediction things, a couple of people in the comments and chat had mentioned Usharan, the Summer King, right? And people have talked about this guy for a while. To be clear, like this has been something on the radar of the FEC players for quite a while. And
they've been asking for it for years.
Yeah. So I don't want to make it sound like it.
Right.
And this guy's effectively the first flesh eater, right? Is what he is. Like he's driven mad in all these different ways, from Nagash's torture and so on and so forth. And I didn't think.
Well, and to be clear, Usharan was Nefrata's younger brother, right?
I don't know if it was, maybe, I don't remember his I legitimately do not remember his story from the old world. He's a character that connects back to the old world. Yes.
Right. So
he has a couple different backstories.
Yeah. So I know at least one of them suggests that like he was a younger brother known as like Lord of Masks, Celebrations, and Festivities.
Okay.
And that becoming the first Strigioi. And so these like ghoulish undead. So I say that to say, I mean, he traces back to the old world.
Yep.
And it would make sense if he finally showed up again.
Yeah, he has a bunch. Like they've retconned some of his background in AOS world, and so I don't know. Like, and they've retconned it all as like this is the story that some people tell, and this is the story that other people tell. Right, that kind of classic unreliable narrator thing.
Yeah.
But yes, he was definitely an old world character, or the world that was, as it were. And I really didn't think or place any great belief that we were going to get this guy or that he was going to show up.
Yeah.
Until Dawnbringers Part 2. So that book was the revelation that made me want to do this show for, as I said, for the first reason I already mentioned, right? The first reason was now, by the way, it looks pretty crisp. Apparently resetting it must have been a magic trick, because now I'm over here watching it, and where was this internet the whole time we were doing the show earlier? Now it looks like totally crisp.
Seriously.
So
yeah, weird.
I don't know, folks. I don't know what to tell you. But I'm glad we got there. So the nature of Dawnbringers Part 2, the first thing was the orc release, right? So seeing the Ironjawz release, now they built on the other sort of appendix small faction in there. Again, we mentioned the differences between the two, but nonetheless, there's a lot of similarities as well. The way they built on that was like, okay, this as we said, this could be done out in the same way. The second thing that then locked this in as like, oh, this is happening, Usharan, the Summer King, is happening, is in the story for Dawnbringers Part 2, okay? There are two different stories that mention people going after this guy or being involved with this guy. So you remember Astria Soulbright, the Stormcast leader? You know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
Okay. Everybody telling me not to jinx it on the connection. Yeah, that's probably true. Okay. The Astria Soulbright is going after this guy. She doesn't know that. She's looking at a place, she's heading to a place called the Charnel Court, and she's looking after like this summer character or prince or something like that. And like they say everything but the exact words summer. Oh, there we go. Now we're getting pixelated again. Good. Okay. I'm glad to see it. So that was like, now they'll often drop little things like that into the story, Tom, as you know, right? Like one of their favorite things to do is to drop in these little, sprinkle in little seeds that they can come back to later and just pick up if they want. So if it was just that one reference, I wouldn't have thought that much of it. But then there's an interstitial in the same book at the end with Callus, and they directly talk about the Summer King and how like this wine and it's from here and it drove somebody into like unbelievable bloodlust and they killed and ate their whole family, blah 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 blah, and it's like this Summer King is very dangerous, yada yada yada, right? And um, so the fact that they reference it twice in the like what other important things are going on in the world right now, it's that tells me this is happening. Like this is happening. This guy's coming. We're getting this kid. Period.
Yep. There's a foreshadowing that has been seeded into the story and the framework and everything else. And then it makes sense to actually then introduce a harbinger for FEC, right?
Yep.
To be a harbinger for something, namely for Usharon.
Yep. So like the fact that they were in the first book, you know, that we got Jarian in book 1, right? And that they're playing some big role in this story. The fact that we showed in book 2 we can double dip by having Gitz, like the Git guy in book 1 leads to the Gitz stuff in book 2. Yeah? Like little rabble rouser Braggett is the one who wakes up Trug. Yeah? And in the same way here, Jarian in the FEC is going to be the harbinger for Usharon and the Carrion King, the Summer King, the Blood Rose Prince, and so on and so forth. The fact that we're now making multiple references to this guy in the like, what's the important story stuff you need to be doing here? The fact that they have Callus and Toll mentioning it, right? Which are like obviously two characters that they generally care a lot about and put like I've called in Callus and Toll and Dawnbringers, I call them the balcony Muppets, like the Statler and Waldorf, because they just sit up there making fun of everything, but they're like truth teller Muppets. They don't actually do anything in the actual Dawnbringer story, but they're
speaking truth.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. Yep. They're like the the Greek choir of the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
And so like the fact that they're talking about him says like this dude's happening to me. Like, I just absolutely believe the new FEC book is going to introduce this kid. We're going to get the Summer King. He's going to be a big, ridiculous ghoul king, right? Like, this just feels like where the story's going.
Will he have his own court? Like,
yes.
Will it be the royal court? Do you think that? And so then we'll get, like, do you think it'll be a somewhat of a mockery of Catacross?
I don't know. Yeah, that's a good question. Will they do a whole diorama? Is that what you're asking me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about models. Let's talk about future models. Yeah. That's my last slide here, actually. So I brought together, Tom, I made a quick collage, it's very simple, of 6 or all of the sort of unsolved rumor engines I could find that could potentially, in my mind, be FEC or something related to FEC. Okay, like it's possible. I'm not saying they all are. I'm saying they're like in the world of the aesthetic. They're not clearly 40K things or a gun or a box of sandbags or something like that, right? Okay. Yep. And so these 6 are up here. I don't think we're going to get a Catacross like diorama. I don't. I really don't. I think we're going to get him as like a standalone kingly figure, right? Catacross is like a military general, right? He's served by these sort of attendants who are runners and messengers and spies and stuff like that, right? But he's ultimately like a Julius Caesar kind of character, right?
Yeah.
Whereas the Summer King is more like, I don't know, for lack of a better term, he's Arthur. If we're going to keep drawing sort of mythological or historical
imagine
paradigms.
that we'll see something Chattakar-esque.
Sure.
Yes, but from a model standpoint, what I'm proposing is something like Chattakar, right? Where you have him and then maybe 1 or 2 attendants.
That I can see.
That style. I can see. Like maybe not a full court, right? Right.
Yes. That I 100% agree with. Something like what Chattakar is, I think, is exactly the model they'll want to go with. And in fact, they'll have to figure out like how do we distance it from what that guy is. Because you look at Chattakar, he's huge comparatively. Right?
Yeah.
And that's what I would expect for the size of this guy. Like I would expect a Chattakar sized model. For sure. For sure.
Yeah, I would even suggest maybe something larger. I wouldn't be surprised if they put him on a throne and had that throne being carried, like a
Okay.
palanquin style. Like I could see something like that potentially.
Okay.
Because a big part of what they were going to want to communicate is the kingly nature. And if he's going to, like, he could just be on a throne, but we just got a Ghoul King special edition on a throne.
Yep.
And
Sure.
so if they do something like that, it would be something either mobile, or it'll him be standing alone, like on the field of battle, being attended to by one or two.
Yeah, like that previous picture I just showed of him would be like a great piece of art to kind of work off of to base it from, right? Like not that exactly, but like him standing astride, like looking to the side, the field of battle with like a rusty sword in his hand and like a flayed cloak flowing behind him that's just like tattered skins
Yep.
and stuff like that, right? Holding like a part like a ripped apart body, right? That instead of a shield or something like that, or a rib cage, or whatever, like that you could go all out, and you could have
Yeah.
all sorts of accoutrement on him and stuff that are sort of holy reliquaries to him in his mind, right? But that are of course actually just like horrific bones and gore that's been reshaped into sort of artifacts of power. Yeah.
I wonder if, just as an aside, I wonder if Chattakar, like, that started out as this model,
Doesn't it feel like it almost
from
might
a
have,
design,
doesn't it?
like from a design standpoint, because Usharon being more beastly and bestial, like you would expect some of that with this,
Mm-hmm.
with the way that they talk about it.
Yep.
And then as well with being attended to by smaller vampires, or or ghoulish type creatures. Like it just makes me wonder if that's how it started out, and they're like, no, we're gonna take another bite at that apple, but we'll use this for something else.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's funny you say that because I was like the same thought that came to my head as well, right? It was like, man, did that guy start as like an early concept where they were trying to get at Usharon, but then just couldn't fit him into the release, or he didn't make sense, and so they like we'll make him, you know, the real form of Radikar or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
But these six models, you mentioned the new Ghoul kit that we saw a leaked sprue of, right? It looks really good. At the so like clearly the ghouls are in need of a redesign. I don't think you're going to find anybody who's opposed to that, right? The little tiny hunched ghouls are like
Nope.
such a weird, almost out of scale thing in the current range. They look like little children ghouls almost, which is creepy in its own right. But I mean, it's it just doesn't fit with the rest of the range, right? You had said the horrors and the flares would stay. I tend to agree with that. Out of these sort of six images, you had mentioned the spear, right, with the skeleton hanging off of it, is like in that could be like a standard bearer for a new unit, right? Because like to them that's a regal flying banner that's displaying their holy crest, right? But in fact it's nothing more than some tattered cloth and a pierced skeleton or something. I thought the same thing with the skull and the beating heart thing. Like that's another one that kind of could be part of that, or part of his whole setup. By the way, the second image there could honestly be part of whatever the whole image of the Summer King is. Like that's pretty ornate. That little creation there. The wings could be his wings. The cloak could be his cloak, right? The little double-headed skull weapon could be like the new ghoul weapon in their hands or something like that. Like all that stuff seems possible to me. What would you want to see as far as new units go? Besides, I think we both agree and think Usharon is coming, right? And so like he seems like a slam dunk to me. I feel like we're definitely getting that guy, and we're definitely getting new ghouls. That's our sort of Ard Boys remake, right? But
Yeah.
are we getting other new units? If so, what are we getting? Like, what do we need to add to this range? Both functionally ground up or story-wise top down.
Like, I would like something as the equivalent of like the Pegasus Knights.
Yep. Yep. I, I'm gonna take that one step farther. I want something actually mounted. Okay.
Correct. Correct.
Like I get it. I get that the flayers and horrors are supposed to be quote unquote knights. Like I can read keywords. I get the story. They're big. They think they're a guy on a horse or whatever. But like you're not. You've got 4 limbs, not 6 or 8 or whatever. You know what I mean? Like it's you know, they're just not. And so actually having something on rotted, horrific, twisted, mutant, hungry, cannibalized creatures, like creatures that have been infected with their madness, with their hunger, with their curse, and have been like twisted into these sort of like exposed muscle, giant fanged monstrosities that they're riding, but to them is like a regal Pegasus. Man, that would be an amazing kit, right? Like, and
Yeah.
deeper than that, like if we expand out and
Yep.
think about roles in the army, one of the things this army really lacks is any kind of anvil, right? One of the classic problems with this army is it just has no anvil, right? It relies on
Yeah.
its durability is almost completely done through model regeneration, right? Through the
Regeneration.
yep.
Yep.
And I don't know if their mechanical work exactly the same in the new book or not. My general feeling would be probably not. That they'll probably reinvent that mechanic, you know, of like the courtiers restoring models to
Yeah.
units and
I
stuff.
mean, I would love for them to get rid of the courtier concept completely.
Yeah, I mean,
This is this the last is this the last army that we have that you build? You build something atypical out of the box contents and not actually be able to achieve the thing that the box is made of. Does that make sense?
it
Like I
does.
think about the old Storm Fiends with like the weird weapon loadouts and stuff like that,
Sure.
or like like the box contents breaking what you're actually building. Like, is this the last holdout? This army?
It's the last one where it actually makes the unit quote unquote worthless or undersized or whatever, and doesn't have some other option for it. Because the other two examples
Yeah.
of that still in the current rule set are in Stormcast and Nurgle at minimum. There might be another one I'm forgetting, but both of those have
Yep.
like the Dragon Lord and the
A hero. Yeah.
yeah, where it's like a
The
hero.
fly. Yeah.
But then in the book, you have the option to take a single, right? Like they've covered for that possibility. So like if you buy the box and you make the hero, then you can take a single Dragon Rider, or you can take a single Blight Lord, right? Um, so like this is the
Like,
last one where they like it actually makes the unit not function. I wouldn't
so can I
mind.
just
Yeah,
ask a question?
go for it.
What if they just got rid of them as they currently are
Sure.
and had a clamshell hero that refills serfs and a clamshell hero that refills knights?
Yeah, yeah. Just make a new.
That seems to
Yep.
like done. Like,
Right.
if you even want to keep it like locked in, right?
Yep.
And that's two. And by the way, those two that I just articulated could potentially build out of the same kit.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, your point being, it's not like we're saying get rid of all courtiers forever. We're saying like actually make kits to support that thing
No.
as opposed to hacking it out of the existing unit, right? So you have like the Surf
Correct.
Courtier and the Knight Courtier effectively, right? Which are now their own standalone clamshell kits or box, the small box kits or whatever, hero box
Yeah.
kits. Yeah.
Because Vargolfs were just generic courtier. Like, they were just everybody courtier, right? Like, you had a one, another, and then a both.
Yeah. And then also just give us the new Vargolf. Like that's a thing I think we all want. Like it makes me so angry that we were so close to that
Right.
with the guy out of Curse City, you know, that was like almost that model again. Like he's easily a replacement in quality plastic. He's a quality model,
Right.
and yet he like doesn't have wings. And it's just a ground pounder jumpy dude. Like why? We were so close. Why did we make an updated slight variant and not actually just replace the freaking guy? Right? It's so frustrating.
Yep.
Um So the like, and it could be that like Jarian, you just take that model for Jarian the Harbinger and you say you can build a generic version of him, right, as it were, sort of.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like he doesn't always have to be like quote unquote the Harbinger. He can also be this. That could be another way to go. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
This
like,
is the Herald version.
yeah, sure,
He refills syrup.
right. But I think that like I think that's just it. I think maybe a knight-ish unit, something mounted on like a weird twisted flesh beast, and Usharan,
Yep.
redone ghouls, redone Vargolf. I think if you were going to give them one other kit, it would be interesting to give them a super heavy. So what I mean by that is like they have infantry and they have heavy infantry, right? But they don't have a super heavy infantry.
Sure.
So this is like your 6 wound and above infantry, right? So think Rat Ogres, think Dracoth Riders, think Morghast, Erakai, right? Now, maybe the Knights could be the super heavy ones. Maybe those dudes are like 6 wounds, right? But again, I could see some twisted monstrosity that's like Usharan's personal court that are like the most heavily mutated, heavily infected by the hunger, sort of ravaging beasts, like 6, 7 wounds, twisted ogres, something like that. Again, so many of these things were almost there in Curse City. It's really funny, right? And like I could see that being a cool
wonder
unit.
if that was the original intent and then they like spliced it into Soulblight.
Yeah, sure. I don't know. It is funny how close it is, but like I look at something like those little tattered wings, the sort of top right rumor engine, and I'm like, that could be the cool flying thing we're talking about, right? Like the cool Pegasus twisted knight we're talking about. So the other option, like one of my problems is I don't think they need another heavy infantry. I just don't. Okay.
No, I would agree with that.
Like horrors and flares are covered. That we'd like the 3-4 wound range. We don't need anything else in that space, right?
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is this: I could imagine a world where we change the role of the horror,
okay,
to be more tankish.
Okay.
Like I could imagine a world where we give them something like unnatural longevity or unnatural something, right? And give them like an elevated ward save, like a 5-up, like they have a 5-up base save, but or a 6-up base save, but maybe you give them a 4-up ward or something like that.
Sure.
Like unholy vitality or something like that. And you make them a tanky you make them the tanky unit, make them 6 wound. Like I could see them changing. Now they just changed the scroll, so I don't think they probably won't change the scroll again. But I could see a world where they do something like that.
Yeah, the other option would be a more traditional like 2 wound infantry as an anvil, right? Where they could go to something like a sort of the equivalent, I'm saying this very broadly, right? Of Chaos Warriors, Ardboys, Liberators, Vindictors, like this is this is a super classic place. And these guys could be like your armored foot knights. That's how they see themselves, right? And they actually just carry like they're clad in bone armor with like rib cage shields and stuff like that, right? And they're like 2 wound heavy ghouls. Yeah. And it's like, okay, they're 2 wounds, they have, let's say, a 4-up save, but they get a 5-up ward because of their like fanatical belief in their reliquaries of all the bodies and stuff they carry. Something like that could end up being their sort of the sort of infantry thing, right? Like a heavier anvil infantry thing. That'd be very easy to imagine, because that sort of like heavy armored foot
I can see that.
Guys coming in 5s or 10s is like a super classic thing across a lot of AOS, and it would make sense in this army, right? Um, if those things are existing in the normal traditional army, then it makes sense. We don't have to like just limit ourselves to what was Bretonia or something, right? Like we can expand the concept of delusional
Sure,
noble
sure.
knightly houses,
Yeah.
right? Um,
Yeah. I want to know when we're gonna get our trebuchet.
well, that's what I was going to ask you. Actually, it's funny you say that. That was going to be my next question, which is, here's my next question, Tom. Should there be any ranged element introduced to this army? I mean, this is like a basically melee army. Flames or breath out of your monsters, and that's it. Which means it has no range. Okay, and it's fine. Not every army needs range, but when you look at something like Ironjawz, another army with no ranged attacks, it can borrow all the Cruel Boys, shooty shooty bang bang, right? You look at Corn, I wouldn't exactly call that a ranged army. It's quite melee, but they have like token ranged units, I guess, and skull cannons or something like that, right? But at least there's like something if you're a person
Yep.
who wants to build that way. So should this have a trebuchet or I don't know. I really can't picture archers, but I don't know, something like that. Should that kind of thing exist in this
I
army?
mean, if you were to do a trebuchet, it needs to be some type of like giant throwing a rock, right? Like it needs to be something that's not the thing. Because I don't see them as they're not a gear type of army, as seen by all of their broken weapons and shit.
Yeah. Let me give my answer, which is no. I don't want them to have any range stuff. Like, bottom line, I just don't think it's necessary. I just don't. They give them the speed to compensate, or again, they should still have some model regeneration. I'm not saying like, oh, get rid of all their healing or their model regen. Like, it can still be there. I just don't think it'll be the exact same rule. But it can still exist and have a place, right? That can be another way that they survive. Like they counter the shooting meta by basically regenning back for when their enemy shoots them, right? Because they can refill their units. Okay, cool, that's fine, right? But
Yep.
and I think that kind of would cover the model range for me. Um, like to me, uh, that's a pretty good range if we had all that introduced, and that could be a really radically different feeling
Yeah.
army. Like this is 3 kits, 4 units away from just being a completely reinvigorated, completely different force, right? Through
Yeah.
Usharan, a flying knight, a heavier, anvil infantry, whatever, something like that. Boom! Suddenly you're playing a different game on your hands, right? Some reinvigorated heroes, like you mentioned. We got it. We got a whole new army here. It's going to feel completely different, but still like itself. I don't mean that in any negative way. I just mean like in its capabilities, it's going to feel like, oh, this is actually a filled out melee army now, not just like a little appendix that they kind of wrote into a book using whatever they could scrounge up that hadn't, that wasn't kept by soul blight, as it were. It seemed like it was something that wanted to eat flesh, basically. Someone mentioned earlier the idea of should gorgers be allowed in this army, like that new gorger unit that everybody thought in the ogre gorgers. Hey, they both like eating stuff. Or is it a problem because they're not dead enough?
No. No, doesn't fit.
Okay.
I'm saying no.
Okay. Fair answer. Fair answer. It's all right. Okay. All right. What else? Anything else on FEC? I mean, I think we pretty much reached the end of what we want to see. I am excited because as I sort of read the book and put that together and saw the Ironjawz, I wanted to do this show because I was like, man, I really think Usharon's coming. Like, I think they've telegraphed it so clearly through the hints that they've dropped, and I'm pretty excited about what that dude could be. I really like painting some of the Flesh Eater Courts models. Like, I painted that dude on the throne. He was a lot of fun. I just think these kinds of models are really, really, really fun to paint, and so that makes me really excited about it. And getting a new up-to-date book, I think, is going to be a really good time for this army, even though it will be theoretically late, very late in the cycle. You are right that they are metaphorically Bretonia, as they're going to get their book like late in the cycle, and then the edition will change a few months later, yet again.
Yeah.
But yeah, anything else you want to say on FEC, or did we cover it all?
No, I think that's. I mean, that's FEC.
There you
That's
go.
what I see.
Time will tell. I hope we're right. I hope some of these images are in fact these new units we're talking about. I hope we do see Usheron. I really believe we're going to. Sorry again, everybody, about the crappy internet through a lot of this show. It is what it is with the hotel. This is the best internet that they have, and I tried. But I'm glad we were still able to do the show. So I hope it was fun and the audio was good throughout. But hey, if you liked it, or just out of pity for us doing this on crappy internet, hey, throw us a like. Subscribe. We'll be back. I'll be back at home next week, not on the road. So we'll be doing this again with quality internet. So subscribe up to catch that. Don't forget, folks, the new merch store is up and down in the show notes below. We've got the new. Have you seen my wife's new shirt, Tom? The
I have
Kathy
not.
has her own shirt now with the dogs on it.
No, that's amazing. I was told to remind you to take the dogs out.
Oh, very good. Yes. So very good. Um, the the important, but yes, Kathy has her own character now in our uh, what do I want to say, pantheon of our
Adorable. I'll have
characters,
to
and
check it
all
out.
three of the dogs. She's like, uh, she has a. I think somebody said like Lady Cathanella, the Countess of Canines, is what we were going to call it, right? So she's like a vampire lady with three dire wolf doggies. So check all that out. We've
I
got
see that.
T-shirts and
I'm literally looking at it right now. It's adorable.
pretty great, right? So check out all the new merch, new
Hmm.
shirts, new hoodies, new cups and mouse pads, and all sorts of fun stuff with all of our characters and images on it. So check out the new store. Um, and as always, you can support the show in the normal way. Share it around. I guess maybe not this episode if you don't want to. If we want people to come back, but tell other people about it. We really appreciate it, and we really appreciate you watching. So yeah, hit like, do all those things. As always, we thank you so much for watching and putting up with horrible hotel internet video.